Night of the Zoopocalypse. Now, this is a movie I'd been hyping up all last year, waiting for its release sometime in January or February. It is now July at the time of recording this. I didn't forget about it, I just only now really probably got access to it. So let's talk about this interesting new-ish international movie with a new take on a zombie story aimed at kids and done in animation. I still don't really know why it wasn't released at the Halloween season because it so clearly lines into it, but nonetheless, this was the movie that I had most been looking forward to this year. I mean, just look at some of the clips shuffling before your very eyes. Just so much, everything in this whole damn movie is so wonderful and colorful. The lighting is dynamic and unique. The visual body designs and animated movements of the characters is unlike anything we've ever really seen before. And as we'll get into it, the actual creative ways they play around with the classic zombie formula is genuinely just fantastically deliberate and inventive. Now, this isn't exactly an indie movie by any means, it's just not done by Hollywood, but it does have, a Hollywood actor in it in the form of David Harbour. But I guess with it being, in my mind, a little bit of an underdog, it goes leaps and bounds ahead of its usual boundaries and really is a super solid movie. Now, this movie, in being a zombie-based story, is one you kind of have to teeter the line carefully when it comes to an all-family entertainment movie, although I suspect it's a PG and not a U. And the way they did it is by setting this entire zombie movie inside of a zoo. Something I don't think we've really seen before in zoo media, other than the likes of some horror video games that completely flopped. And it all centers around one wolf in particular, dealing with the arc of being one with the pack or being independent, at the same time as a pink meteor hits a satellite, is electrocharged, and then lands into the zoo and starts this zombie apocalypse. I love all sorts of micro gags here and there. The whole opening is a fake zombie scenario that turns out to just be an act. The meteor that hits the zoo is actually incredibly tiny, but then at the same time, there's some really interesting mysteries surrounding the origins of this zombie apocalypse. I mean, a meteor alone is unique in its own sense, but it's also like kind of a beating pink heart as well. It's a biological invasion of sorts. It's just endlessly original, and that's going to be the theme throughout most of this movie. Now, I'm going to do a lot of the skimming on the part of the narrative, mostly because it's kind of your standard zombie film. It has its general rises and stakes as things go. But I'd also highly recommend you just seeing this movie if you get the chance and access to it. Because I think this is actually a relatively high-tier movie for me out of everything in the year that I'd like people to experience themselves first. And as we bounce around the zoo a little bit, we'll start to see several recurring main characters of all sorts of animals. Of course, you're going to see all kinds being bitten piece by piece and growing the horde all the more. But there are a few standouts that really make note of themselves. You've got a big, scary tiger character who at first doesn't talk and then does and is kind of a gentle giant-esque character. You've got a French type of monkey who's constantly making fourth wall kind of breaking jokes because they're a big fan of cinema and so know all the tropes of the stories. And then you've got the likes of an ostrich and a capybara, and also basically Moodeng just shoved into this movie. I don't know if they had it in mind with Moodeng specifically, or if it was just a wonderful accident that they managed to sync up with. Maybe as things go on, that'll be a slightly more dated joke, but hey, baby hippos are always pretty cute, so maybe not. Really though, as you can imagine, it's a zombie movie, so zombie things happen around these titular characters that start coming into their own and getting their own personalities. You've got one monkey guy who's very self-centered, the lemur guy more focused on the cinema side of things, the ostrich believing that they're not really going to be the type of person to make a sacrificial play, the wolf working out independence versus the pack, all sorts of classics. And I think a lot of these character arcs do generally well as things go over, but where this movie really shines is in the actual dynamics of this zombie world. Because by all means, this is not a generic zombie movie. Yes, there are zombies, and yes, it does spread, but there's a little bit more to it. Because not only do I like the visual designs of their eyes being this massive, glowing source of light energy, toppled with already the crazy animation, but also, what's really interesting about this zombie spread is the animals are then morphed biologically by whatever pink substance is in the meteors to turn them into gummies, to turn them into sweet treats, I guess, that changes their very biology so that they, after a while, are able to start morphing and twisting around. There's a great scene of the gang being cornered by a gorilla zombie, trying to barge into one of the rooms. The gorilla, by the way, was a lovely character before they were bitten and betrayed by the other monkey guy. Gotta love that. A little bit of arcs coming back to bite them. But anyway, genuinely, by making these characters allow themselves to be gummified, and that allows their bodies to change, you can then have scenes where the gorilla's arm is literally cut off by a door, and it's okay. And they really play around with it in a way that's very nice and adaptable in kids' media, but also opens up for way better zombie mechanics. Especially because in animation, you can do practically anything. It's a lot harder in live action to make a guy lose an arm and then stick his arm to his own face and slap you with it, you know? Hello there, thank you for making it to the halfway mark of this video. Come subscribe if you haven't already for more reviews of animated movies. There's a handful still coming this year. Smurfs, Bad Guys 2, Pets on a Train, Sausage Party Season 2. We got a whole breadth of stuff to do, so come subscribe if you're interested in seeing us cover those in the future. Right, back to the second half of this. And all across the board, as you see more of these out of context shuffle clips, you can just see some of the crazy stuff they do when the actual zombie mechanics come in. Whether it is animals getting decapitated and then still chasing you with all their limbs combined in different ways, or how zombies are now able to combine with other zombies. Oh, sorry, they're not called zombies in this movie, by the way, they're called Gumbies. And how they even start to learn the mechanics of what makes a zombie stop being a zombie, and then they play around with the twist of, oh, it's not what we actually thought, and stuff like that. It's just like good and classic. However, if I was to say a notable criticism of this movie, other than the fact that, you know, there's not crazy boundaries to change, in that it's still always going to be in the category of a zombie movie that happens in a zoo, so it's just different zombie antics are done in unique, creative ways. The other thing is, admittedly, the lemur character. They're not actually lemurs. In fact, I think pretty much all of the animal protagonists are slightly off-kilter animals to what you know? It's not just a monkey, it's a particular genus of monkey that I currently can't remember. Same with, it's not actually a lemur, it's something specific. Capybara, they're all niche animals as a way of being unique, and I really, really like that. But the cinema guy, the guy who loves talking about cinema, his entire thing is calling out what stage of the horror movie we're at, which is, of course, makes sense. In trying to be a kids movie, it makes it less scary to say, hey, kids, here's what's gonna happen next. You're in Act 2, prepare for a betrayal. It's Act 3, we're gonna be sad and then be happy about it. And that's fine. I don't hate that. In fact, I think that's a really good way to adapt a horror for kids. What bothers me is the fact that this character is being surrounded by all the rest of the main cast other than the wolf and the tiger. And it gets to the point where they start to only focus in on what he's saying rather than themselves. Hold it! And though their character arcs come into play, the ostrich does a sacrificial play at one point to beat their arc. It does, after a while, get to a point where half the cast is just talking about the fact that they're in a zombie movie in the movie. And it doesn't get away from that as often as I would like it to actually experience said zombie movie. That being said, when it does eventually get to the zombie mechanics, this is where the movie really shines. And it really gets cool when they get to the point where they start combining all of the zombies together, try to take them all down at once with the powers of soapy water, only to discover that it wasn't soapy water that randomly de-gummified one of the animals at one point. It was the sound of music, which loops quite nicely to some of the mechanics of the zoo. Great, classic ending. But I also especially like that the final climax, as much as it's kind of a classic, it's also the perfect end of stakes for a zombie movie if you need to end and resolve it, which is every animal, by the end of the story, in their gummified forms, combining into this super massive giant zombie villain. Sorted, solid, love that stuff. As if they're attacking the very source of the zombie conflict itself with the original Patient X, the pink heart in the middle of this whole thing. Very, very nicely well done. But this movie is very much a collective sum of a bunch of great creative ideas, and when you add the extra layer of character arcs and emotional developments and anything beyond a well-done, simple zombie story, there's a little bit less to be enjoyed than there could be. I think the animation hits it out of the park. The soundtrack is damn good for that sort of kooky kind of alien-y vibe, and the choreography ideas and designs of the zombies and the mechanics it works with are fantastic. Not to mention the designs and the way everybody moves is just so unique and interesting. But really, while the writing is safe for kids and creative in doing a new zombie story, The actual characters, I think, leave a lot to be desired. And unfortunately, it's the lemur in particular that's a nice, addition, but takes away from everyone else at the same time. I kind of feel like I would have preferred them most if they were like a Scrat from Ice Age, where you see them a bunch, but they're just observing completely separately, like a narrator, to talk to us, and then the secondary characters actually have room to do their thing. The main characters also aren't really as intruded as much, they also don't push as well or as hard as they could do, but that's okay, because this is a very simple, genuine kind of kids movie trying to work out how to do horror in a tasteful, successful way. And in that regard, I think they've done very, very well. And it all comes together with all the animals, in fact, being part of a pack. Oh, isn't that lovely? But overall, this was the movie I was most hyped to see, and it did do the creative, flourishing stuff as immaculately as I'd hoped they would. The writing was just a little bit held back. I would say it's better than a 6 out of 10, maybe a 7 out of 10, but it is relatively simple and standard, a great thing for the audience it was going for, but emotionally, it was a little bit weak, and plotline-wise, it was quite flat. But great when it comes to the creative dynamics and artistry of the art form, and the kind of thing I would absolutely love to see more often, because it's not the kind of stuff you see in classic Hollywood animated stuff these days. But hey, at the very least, I'm just glad I finally got around to seeing the damn thing. With it being an international movie, it's not had a lot of showings in the UK. It's been a bit of a handful to actually get to see it with my own British eyes. Nonetheless, for now, my name's been Daz. Thank you very much for reaching the end of this review of Night of the Zoopocalypse. Let me know what you think. Have you seen this movie yet, and what do you think of it? I'd love to hear all of your thoughts and more. Maybe I should keep up with more international movies. I gotta work out where to find these things consistently. It doesn't exactly come straight to my lap when it's not necessarily releasing in England, so we'll see. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I shall see you all in a little bit. Cheerio!